Activists with the Listen to Michigan campaign are calling on Democrats to vote uncommitted instead of voting for the incumbent Democratic president, Joe Biden, in order to register discontent about the president's policy in the Israel-Hamas war. Heading into tonight, Listen to Michigan was hoping to garner at least 10,000 uncommitted votes, roughly Donald Trump's margin of victory in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Right now, they are at over 20,000 votes. That is almost 16% of the vote across the state. Listen to Michigan now expects they will even receive a delegate to send to the Democratic convention in Chicago this summer. Joining us now is Layla El-Abad, campaign manager for the Listen to Michigan campaign. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's a big night for your grassroots organization. Can I first get your thoughts on the numbers we have thus far? I think our official count is over 20,000. We have some reporting that says it could go as high as 100,000. We know that Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by 154,000 in the state. Is there any chance Listen to Michigan gets to that number?
I mean, that would be amazing for us to get to that number. But right now, we know that we are emerging victorious. We had a modest expectation of 10,000 votes, and we've already doubled that just in the short time that after polling locations have closed. So we feel really good right now, and it would be amazing to reach those numbers as well.
There is some talk that you may earn a delegate to the Democratic convention. I wonder if you've kind of have a strategy for what you might do with that delegate and what the future of that delegate might be.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's just really exciting to even think about the prospect of sending a delegate and having that. And we will talk about that as our next steps. Right now, we are celebrating this victory, and you know the Palestinians are in our hearts and prayers right now, and we know that we are doing this in order to have a permanent ceasefire and put pressure on Joe Biden to change course now.
You talk about a permanent ceasefire. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about the coalition, because it seems as if there's if not two factions, two sides of it, insofar as one group of people who want to see concrete action from this White House. But then there may be another subset of individuals for whom the Biden administration has crossed effectively a red line, for whom they will not vote. They will not vote for Joe Biden in November. They may sit out the election entirely. Is that an accurate assessment? And could you give us a sense of the sort of breakdown in terms of what percentage of people are still open to a message and action from this White House?
Well, the Listen to Michigan campaign has been solely focused on the primary to send that resounding message to Joe Biden that we need a ceasefire now. We need him to listen to his core constituency, his base that put him in an office in 2020. And he needs to listen to us when we say we need a permanent ceasefire in order to save as many lives as possible. And Michiganders, especially within our community, the Arab American and Muslim American community, this aggression has affected us directly. And so when we talk about these factions within this movement, this pro ceasefire movement, I think that there is going to be, come November, there is going to be folks that can't bring themselves to vote for Joe Biden because of that deep betrayal, not only as Muslim Americans and Arab Americans that have direct ties to Palestine and to that region, but also it feels a betrayal to our democracy that we would align ourselves, the United States would align themselves with Netanyahu and his right-wing government over the people that have been saying since October, we need a permanent ceasefire right now.
Is there a conversation inside the coalition about the possible scenario in which the sitting out of the election hands a victory to Donald Trump? Is that something that is actively discussed within the Listen to Michigan group?
Well, we know that our community that has supported Listen to Michigan, that have worked on Listen to Michigan, they're not going to vote in a monolith. So I can't speak for everyone that is part of our coalition. But what I do understand is that we know this coalition knows that Donald Trump and his presidency was not a friend to the Muslim American and Arab American community, but most communities that were part of this coalition. But what we can say right now is we focused on the primary to send this message to Joe Biden that he needed to listen to Michiganders when we said we need a permanent ceasefire now. And come November, it's going to be Joe Biden and the Democratic Party that are going to be held accountable for handing the White House to someone like Trump.
Layla El-Abed, thank you so much for your time tonight. We'll be watching those returns, as I'm sure you will be too. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.